Democrats have now added 38 House seats in the midterm elections with 2 undecided races left. They could end up with a plus 40 gain. The popular vote margin for Democrats is now 7.8 points, bigger than the 7-point GOP margin back in 1994 when newly anointed House Speaker Newt Gingrich said, and I quote, "If this is not a mandate to move in a particular direction, I would like somebody to explain to me what a mandate would look like." And in the final outstanding Senate race, the runoff between Republican Cindy HydeSmith and Democrat Mike Espy in Mississippi, HydeSmith may be in a bit of trouble in a state won by Trump by 18 points. New York Times reporting that a private Republican poll last week found HydeSmith's lead had narrowed to just 5 points. Joining me now for more on what all this means, Democratic political strategist Karen Finney and Christina Greer, professor of political science at Fordham University. Karen, I'll start with you. Every day goes by and the House numbers look better and better. and it's not just the number of seats. I thought this Dave Weigel was tweeting out the margins in Orange County, which I had not been looking at because, it gets called and then you sort of, but in all these races, these are healthy margins. Cisneros +2 and 39. Katie Porter by 3.4. Rauda over Rohrabacher, which everyone I thought on election night was a squeaker, by 6.6 points. And Levin by 12. That was a whooping.
It was a whooping, and you know what, Chris? It also reminds us that's why the counting actually matters. I mean, we do have attendance, right? And I think that's one of the big lessons out of this midterm election, that we have to make sure that every vote is counted always, and that when people show up to the polls, they have the opportunity to vote and know that that vote is going to be counted. I think that has made a huge difference, as we've seen in a number of places across the country. But again, I think the other thing you see in Orange County is people are won by some of these really impressive margins, but I think we also need to pay attention to how they campaign. The fact that people stayed very close to the ground, they ran good ground games, good field programs, they stayed close to voters, close to the issues that voters really cared about, and we're talking about those issues, and we're talking about things like healthcare, which people really care about.
Yeah, there's a bigger takeaway here, I think, which is I thought Nate Silver nailed it well. With the piece, Trump's base isn't enough. Basically, the idea is like, yes, we've all heard about his base for 2 years. It's a remarkable thing how attached his base is to him. It's amazing what they'll forgive. It's amazing how he can do no wrong in their eyes. It is not a majority of the country. That's the brute fact of the matter.
And Democrats need to remember that. I mean, his base is very strong in the primaries, right? And so that's where you have Republicans running scared and Republicans who used to be moderate and somewhat sensible sort of saying and doing things that leave the majority of Americans scratching their heads. But I do think also the base isn't enough, but the Democratic institution needs to make sure that they're supporting particular candidates in their own primaries and sort of before some of these competitive districts come up. So, the role of Tom Perez is not to just support Democrats, but also to help identify talent. And there are ways in which this blue wave that's come in and all these women of color who are amazing, many of them weren't supported by the party before they got out of their primary. And so that's something that the Democratic Party really needs to look at and look at themselves.
Karen.
Obviously, here's the thing, though, and I partially agree with Christina, and I actually think the DNC, I was there under Chairman Dean, whose whole mantra was, you got to show up and ask people for their votes, and we should never concede a seat anywhere.
Right.
And I do think that under Tom Perez, we're trying to get back to that strategy, and I think if you look at, I worked on this race, what Stacy Abrams was able to accomplish in Georgia, the really important lesson there is the fact that she said, I'm going to go to all 159 counties in this state. I'm going to talk to everybody. I'm going to unabashedly talk about who I am and what I care about. And I think she also sent a message that you can do that and win. And we have to get away from these labels about, expanding Medicaid as a liberal issue or a conservative issue. It's a human issue. It's an issue that people care about. But I think what the party has to pay attention to is, if you look at what Beto accomplished, if you look at what Stacy accomplished all across this country, where you have now new volunteers, new grassroots donors, new voters, right? I mean, her campaign identified 1.4 million Democrats, potential Democrats, and went out and set out a year and a half before the election to register those people, motivate those people, stay in contact with those people, and turn people out. And that's what the party has to do all across the country over the next 2 years.
So you're talking about showing up in places. Mississippi is a place that people don't expect Democrats to win, but there is a contested race. Interesting, tonight there's a debate Between Cindy HydeSmith and McCaskill. Just to give a little context, she negotiated, she only wanted it sponsored by the Mississippi Farm Bureau, members of whom have financially supported her. She didn't want any journalists or audience members, and she insisted in the negotiations on being able to have a pad that she got an hour before the debate so she could take in, meaning that she and her staff could write things on it. So I want her.
All right, as a professor, slow down.
Yeah, I know. Slow down. That was a lot to process. I've been reading about negotiations all day, but you just gave me a look like, excuse me?
Right. That's okay. Sorry.
Wait, so but I want to play. I want to play the clip. She got in trouble because she talked about someone that they're so close that she would go to a public hanging if he invited her. This is, of course, in Mississippi, which was the heart of lynching in the South for years. Here's her apology just now, haltingly being read off the said notepad in the debate. Take a listen.
For anyone that was offended by my comments, I certainly apologize. There was no ill will, no intent whatsoever in my statement.
Read the apology.
She needs to read the apology because she's not apologetic. I mean, what we have to understand as a nation, and unfortunately we're very ahistoric in this country, when it comes to lynching and the work that Ida B. Wells did and the work that so many, especially black women, put their lives on the line. Fannie Lou Hamer trying to register people to vote in Mississippi. People losing their lives in Mississippi, especially trying to vote. Lynched for trying to vote. For her to make that comment, not apologize for days on end, and then need to read it. It's a double bind. But I do want to go back to something Karen said really briefly. It's like, I think that Stacy Abrams ran. I mean, obviously she did the work, right? Yeah. I think the Democrats really do need to figure out how they want to utilize all of these new voters moving forward as well. I totally agree.
And new political talent. Karen Finney and Christina Greer, thank you both for being with me. Still ahead, the latest on the crisis unfolding in California, the thousands of residents who